Hello everybody, this is your European Africanist. Today I will speak on Martin and Malcolm assassination and the history of the LGBT community. April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King fatally shot from the balcony in Memphis, Tennessee at the motel. Martin Luther King did not die on the balcony. Martin Luther King did not die on the balcony. I'll say that again. Martin Luther King did not die on the balcony. He was shot, but he still survived the gunshot wounds. Right? Martin Luther King died in the hospital when the police were surrounding his bed, and they suffocated him with a pillow when they found out he still was breathing in oxygen. It's very mysterious once you think about that. It was the Green Berets, the military, who shot Martin Luther King off the balcony. Then it was Jesse Jackson, somebody that was a part of King's entourage, who was working with the FBI. Look at that. He was working with the FBI. Then it was the Ku Klux Klan, who planned and organized for King to be shot on the balcony at the motel in Memphis, Tennessee. Martin Luther King's attorney, William Francis Pepper, proved in court that it was the government, the FBI, that murdered Martin Luther King Jr. and not James Earl Ray. It was proven that. And James Earl Ray still had a life sentence in prison for a so-called murder he didn't commit. In 1999, King's family won the case. They won the case, and it was already proven that the government murdered Martin Luther King Jr. Let me not remind you, that same day Martin Luther King got assassinated, a preacher picked out Martin Luther King's tie. Why would a pastor picking out another pastor tie? You know? But the pastor picked out a red colored tie for Martin Luther King Jr. So they know to direct those shots when they throw through Martin Luther King's body. Rest in peace to Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King, he was a great man. Martin Luther King, he was a family man. Martin Luther King stood and fought for what he believed in. And I totally respect him. Any man, any woman who's willing to lay their life on the line for their people because they truly have a belief or they can see the vision that they could possibly have freedom in this country that we call America, totally got my respect in my heart. But next, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, better known as Malcolm X. Before I even jump into that assassination, he was given that name by Elijah Muhammad himself once he made the pilgrimage to Mecca. So, Malcolm X, one of the people who influenced me, one of the people who I look up to in life, Malcolm X, he was brutally assassinated on February 21st, 1965 in a ballroom in Harlem, New York. So, this is what it was, okay? In 1964, he gathered up people who had African in their body. It doesn't matter what kind of color or creed you were. If you had one drop of African in your body, you are African. You are black. He gathered up the Afro-Americans. And the Afro-Americans would start in Harlem, New York to build up a self-sufficient economic base for their own self. But let me tell you another reason why, and it's a few, but I'm just going to give you two reasons why Malcolm X got murdered. I'm going to give you two reasons why he got murdered. Number one was what he was doing in Africa. Number two, Malcolm would try to convert those members of Nation of Islam. Master Fraud Muhammad found Nation of Islam in the 1930s when America was facing the Great Depression. And then once he went to Saudi Arabia and he was greeted by people who was different from him, looked nothing like him. That was white. That was green. He was given a different reality than what he expected. He wasn't expect not to face racism in Saudi Arabia. When he went to Saudi Arabia, they treated him as a human being. It didn't matter whether he was black, purple, or green or yellow. They treated him as a human being. So once he came back to America, when racism was so popular, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X met up one time. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, they both died at age 39. Let me talk about the LGBT community now, because they have a history, okay, a history of being mistreated, brutalized, and facing oppression by the European officers also too. Marsha P. Johnson, a strong voice and a voice for the LGBT community, was brutally found in the water. I watched a documentary on Marsha P. Johnson. She was found in the water with a hole in her head. The officers that was trying to find out evidence, or how could this possibly happen to this transgender individual, not calling her no names because she is dead, and I do respect, dead people, but they was thinking to themselves, who would do something like this, and how and why this happened? So Marsha P. Johnson, she went into this car at nighttime. She was with two people. She wasn't supposed to go in that car because the car overall, from a point of view, from her distance, in the car distance, it looked like it was suspicious. Like, who are these people? So she went into the car, and then her body was found in the water hours later. It was people that was calling her, trying to get in contact with her to say, hey, where are you at? Are you okay? But she would never, ever answer those calls. And she was found in the water with her head down and her arms down too. It was based on tensions between officers in the LGBT. That's why they had those riots. If the police caught anyone that was whatever kind of gender in the LGBT community, whether you're lesbian, transgender, officers will brutalize and kill people that was a part of the LGBT community in New York City. That's right. They will really do that to them. And if you don't believe me, you could do your research on that. And you could watch documentaries or read up on any article. The police will mistreat and brutalize people that was a part of the LGBT community. So we got the same enemy, but we not fighting for gender. We fighting for being treated like a human being. My philosophy is that the LGBT will fight for their gender to exercise that. And when it comes down to us, we have to fight to be treated as a human being that's facing this oppression in the United States, that's still facing 450 years of oppression, police brutality, and still not being treated as we should. Because they say we got the amendment, all the rights, but does those rights really matter to black folks that's living in America? I end my video off by saying this. If Martin and Malcolm is willing to die for our freedom and to be assassinated at age 39, for our freedom that we have to lay our own lives down to receive some freedom.